It's just loud and annoying and unfunny. The commercial.
Like the Quackast.
It's like a Quackast kind of, yeah.
Oh, hello, this is the Quackast. This is Ozone Ocean doing the Quackast. This is Quackast number 389, and we have Baines. Hi, Baines.
Hello.
Hi, Tarts.
Hola.
And g'day, Pit.
I'm back.
You are. So we're going to be talking about bad guys, aren't we, Tarts? Or bad girls. We're going to be talking about bad people, the evil characters.
We love bad people.
Yeah.
They're the best.
I'm not even talking about fictional ones. We like people who are like mean to puppies, that tease children, make them cry,
park in handicapped spaces,
that give your butt a little jostle on the subway.
Oh no, that's unforgivable.
And generally promise you that everything floats.
Yeah. They all float. That's a good Nick.
The worst of man spreaders, though. That's another form of evil. But before we get into that, I got to bring up the featured comic. So here's the featured comic. Hello, I'm Ozone Ocean, and my feature for the week was Crypts and Cantrips. In a fantastical fantasy land lives a young little scribe, a purple-skinned dark elf by the name of Kitov Siege. He knows nothing of the world outside the big city. He has a good job, but he longs for real experience and adventure. He likes what he reads in books, but somehow the life of a scribe doesn't seem to suit him. It looks as if his fortunes are about to change, though. A rough-looking young fellow selling maps walks into his master's house. The man reeks of adventure. This is a fantasy adventure comic. The art is full color and fully digital. It's a very good-looking comic by It's Curty, and it's rated T. I like it. It's an enjoyable romp so far. Well, not much of a romp yet. We're just being introduced to the character, the young Kitov, and the way he's fitting into his world and hoping for the adventure to come. So I hope you enjoy this and follow along with it. It looks to be an exciting little comic, and it's nice to delve into the fantasy world. It's based on the Dungeons and Dragons version of fantasy, so you have that kind of thing, with dark elves and high elves and the Underdark and all those kind of tropes. So if you are familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, or even if you're not, this will still be quite fun and cool. I think you will enjoy it. Okay. Crypts and Cantrips. Rated T. Read it. And that was the featured comic. Okay, so now for the featured music. Gun Wallace has given us this great theme, so I'm just going to introduce it now. The theme for this week was Gun Wallace's music to Fluffy 500. Speed, progress, movement. We advance, never reversing. We forge ahead, never rehearsing. This is fast music. It really evokes the sound of racing. That's what I think anyway. I hope you enjoy it. Gun Wallace has done this music to Fluffy 500. It's by Iron Horse Comics, rated T. Take it away, Gun Wallace, with Fluffy 500. was our featured music by Gun Wallace. Thank you so much for that, Gun Wallace. Again, another peach, another prize. Okay, so the Quackast, Bad People Tance. What do you think of bad people?
What do I think of bad people?
Yeah. Do you love them? Do you hate them? You're super turned on by bad people.
I hate them. That's so you told me to introduce how we're going to be talking about bad guys.
Yes.
And it's, if we go along the news post I made some time ago, it would be how to make your, like in a narrative, in your webcomic or whatever creative thing you are making that requires a plot, how do you make the bad guys look intimidating? How do you make them be taken seriously by your audience? How do you make them come across as individuals that are threatening and they are actually worthy of holding the position of the main antagonist? So that was the question. And what I was trying to do was to make like a few trajectories where of things that you have to keep in mind when you create a villain. And I'm saying a villain, but it could be just an antagonist, or it could be even like a force of nature or whatever. But the force of nature doesn't have a personality. So some of these things won't apply unless you're making fantasy. So the things that I listed, the list is definitely by no means complete, is that the character that is the villain should exude confidence, should be able to command a room once they are in it, and should be able to immediately come across as someone that carries weight in everything he or she says or does, because that means this confidence means that this person has had enough successes in their life to warrant this. So that means that they actually have a high possibility of being successful in the future, and thus keep being confident.
Yeah.
So, and it is up to our hero to cut that streak of success. Another thing that I mentioned was that having them remain calm for the most part, like generally have them be calm and composed and in control of themselves, because that means that they are the ones that have the power in an interaction. The person that loses their temper for whatever reason, whether it is warranted or not, tends to be the person that loses the power, that loses the round, that loses the control in the interaction. So they have anger and they emote very dramatically. That's why in my line of work as a consultant, what I advise parents is that you must never lose control in front of your kid when you're trying to discipline your kid, because that means that you and be angry at them and yell at them and stuff, because that means that now your kid has control rather than you, and that makes your feedback less worthy of attention. Even if your child doesn't even think this consciously, they will react to this. So that goes for villains as well. If they can keep their control for the most of the situations, even when they are pissed about something, or even if they don't like something, but they remain calm and calculating and cerebral, they will come across as more intimidating, more powerful, and therefore more dangerous.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to cut it short as much as possible. The other element I said was that they have to be efficient. They cannot be stormtroopers and shoot everywhere else except the target, because that will make them non-threatening, and that will make your audience not consider them as a threat, and thus everything will lose in the stakes that you are setting against this character that is the villain and is your main obstacle. So you need to show that when the bad guy sets his or her sights on something, then they have very good chances of actually succeeding, or even overwhelming chances of succeeding.
Yeah.
And the last thing is, of course, that they shouldn't have any moral constraints or compunctions. Even like they have to not have limits, so that whatever it is that is before them, then you are afraid for the obstacle in front of the villain, because the villain is going to just plow through it rather than consider it. And that makes the villain again dangerous, threatening, taken seriously. So that was the news post, basically.
Yeah, there's a fantastic outline. It's very well thought out. You can tell you're an academic because
thank you.
You've come at this in a very scientific point of view, researched and cleverly argued from all the different angles and aspects. So it's a good way to define villains. What about I think I came up with the whole thing about relativism. What about that kind of angle for villainy? How does that change things if we're being a bit relative? Should the villains be more absolute, or does relativism have a? I think it's you really can't play too much around with relativism, because the fact is the good and bad in your work has to relate to a good and bad that the audience understands, and the audience isn't. You're going to have to do a lot of work to clue the audience into the relativeness that you're trying to make. That you're trying to portray in your work. It's a lot more tricky to do that than it is just to give them absolutes. Well,
okay, so wait, but I think we need to distinguish. I think that really depends on the kind of story that you're going to make. I mean, a villain who's absolutely evil.
Oh no,
I
don't mean absolutely evil. I mean from the point of absolute. Like killing is wrong, that kind of thing. Okay, we're going to say rape is bad, killing is wrong, stealing is bad, that kind of thing. We're going to have absolutes rather than relative. Killing is wrong, but if we do, yeah.
That's a good example that you're presenting, because, for example, killing is wrong, but it is relative. It can be relative. Rape, on the other hand, has no context where it is warranted. You can never justify raping someone, whereas justify killing someone, that is more possible to do. Whether it is absolutely right or wrong is up for a lot of debate, but within context and everything. But you can get your hero to kill people, and people will still consider that person, the good guy, or not kill people, I mean. But if you have your hero raping, you're going to have a very, very hard time selling them as a good person. So
it's a good point.
Yeah.
It depends
all right.
on what the discussion is on.
Killing animals, like killing a dog, harming children, these kind of things, in a more relative, if we're doing things in a more relative way, you can say, oh, it's not so bad. This person's harming a child because, they're the child of the bad guys, and this person's children are killed by the bad guys, so it's justified that he's taking revenge or whatever. You could
the child of the corn. You should
Well,
burn
exactly, a child of the corn.
Yeah. All right. If we're doing about absolutes, then harming children is that? Yeah, that's bad no matter what. So.
think please everyone interrupt. Like I don't want to hog.
And Pitt, I didn't mean to bulldoze you there. It's just that I wasn't talking about absolutely evil. That was the only thing.
No. It's fine.
But yeah.
Anyway, what I wanted to say was that there is a difference, and there has to be not has to be, but it's good to have a distinction between your sides and the people taking these sides, because you might have an evil person on the side of the good guys and still have them be an evil person, and you could have a good person on the side of the bad guys and still have him or her be a good person. How they develop is a different matter, but at least when you set your characters up in the beginning, you can definitely have these things going for you. Like, for example, if you have a person fighting for the good cause, whatever this cause is, but the means that they are using are very, very questionable or downright completely immoral, and then that person is more likely to be thought of as evil, even though theoretically it's all for a particular goal, to succeed in a particular goal. Whereas you might have someone on the side of the bad cause, but having several lines that they draw on the sand that they will not cross, and certain things that they will not do, and then by comparison, that person will look better on the moral scale than the other one. So you can have these interesting conflicts.
Yeah, well, you can have, like in your Les Mis whole thing, you had a whole thing about Les Mis a while ago, but say the guy who's the antagonist for much of that is the antagonist because he sticks to the rule of law no matter what, even though, and that makes him the bad guy because he's inflexible and he absolutely sticks to that. So bad guys.
Because the law is basically the one that is the real villain, you could argue, is the law and the social structure.
Yeah.
And he's sticking to it, so ergo, he is the antagonist and he is the villain.
Yeah, but the thing is, that is a character that isn't someone who is like necessarily is gonna like break through things, or doesn't have a strict moral code. Is someone who does, and that's what causes him to be evil in that context. And if you're doing a thing with a religious bad guy, like a bad beast or something like that, it can be the same thing, because religion is often stuck to a very, very old, inflexible kind of set of values, and it's very easy to have that as the bad guy in something, because it is so inflexible.
That's the, you could say, a very extreme, not extreme, but a very iconic example of someone being on the right, quote unquote, side, the side of God, and being an absolute devil about it. So there you go.
Yeah, it's a famous kind of thing. Yeah, so you can definitely do it that way, and so I think people would, in the modern Dungeons and Dragons depiction of evil and bad and something like that, that would be considered a lawful evil because it sticks to a code. Mm-hmm. So that's a very useful kind of yardstick. You have those 9 points. Well, it's only like what is it? 3 for the bad, and 3 for the neutral, and 3 for the good, I think.
I don't know about that. But the thing is, no matter where they stand on the villainy scale, is how do you make them come across as the real danger, the real threat? And that's why I said, how do you make them intimidating? It's because you could have a very evil, like for example, take Chucky the doll. Like he is super evil. He is possessed by, I don't know, a demon or whatever it is. But it's a doll that isn't even knee high, more or less in level, and they can be stopped. It can be stopped by a door, basically. So exactly how can you make that actually intimidating? You can't.
He's a serial killer in a doll's body, Tans. Do your research.
Yeah, that's right.
I think so, anyway. Yeah, in one of the newer movies, they put the one of the main protagonists, I think the main protagonist, in a wheelchair.
Yeah,
that I thought like, oh, that's how you make the doll. Like at one point, I think she falls out of the chair or something, and then the doll can come up to her, and she's vulnerable. And I was like, you have to kind of jump through those hoops to,
create new kinds of vulnerability. Like another thing that kind of works with that kind of story is that if you see, I don't remember the original very well, but I remember there was a child in it. It was a boy who had Chucky. And the kind of way that you could make that intimidating is like, you know, maybe nobody else believes the boy, you know, and maybe he's alone with this problem. And that could help to really create a villain too, or at least something really evil is, you know, you have to kind of remove any kind of help.
Yeah, they did that in the horror movies about ventriloquist dummies that come alive.
Yeah.
I
know what you're talking about. The puppet master.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got very few people that are in on it. And yeah, it's like a private horror sort of thing. Or even the famous Twilight episode with Shatner flying in the airplane, and every time he looks out the window,
it's all based on that.
Yeah.
And no one else can see it.
Man.
This horrible monster dancing around on the wing and doing all sorts of bad things. Pulling
and the whole thing is about not being believed.
Yeah. And so then, I mean, I like things like that because then it to who are a threat in different ways other than just the head-on, you know, they're a physical, I mean, they are a physical threat, but then other than just like the head-on, like, you know, like in Tange's example, what she was saying, all right, well, Chucky, you can just kick Chucky. So yeah, so then you have to find different ways to make him intimidating. That's not to say that motif of like the killer doll can't work. That just means you have to work with what that character is, what that creature is, to find what could be scary or intimidating or evil or villainous about it and make that work.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Tans.
Go on.
I was just gonna take a different tack on the whole evil thing. So if you're riffing off the same thing, you go.
No, please.
Okay, I was thinking of the famous evil character played by guy who died recently. Can't remember his name. He was anyway, Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and the guy who plays Sheriff of Nottingham.
Sheriff, Alan Rickman.
So that's
great stuff.
That was the best role in the whole film. He sort of beat out everybody else for their acting in that, but that he portrayed that character probably in the most iconic way you've ever seen Sheriff of Nottingham portrayed, and he is incredibly a charismatic bad guy, and he does come across as bad, not only because he wears black and he has an English accent, two things that signal a bad guy in anywhere. But he he did those things that the Tance mentions. He doesn't have a lot of barriers, things that that the hero, codes that the hero might conform to. They totally don't mean anything to him. He totally busts through, bulldoze through anything, and he wouldn't consider that a barrier to his evil at all. But the problem with him was he would rant a bit, and he would lose his cool a bit. So he did break in that kind of way, but not too much. He wasn't like Kylo Ren in that Star Wars film.
I was just thinking of Kylo Ren as a very, always losing it. And that's probably, one of the things that makes him a way less intimidating villain. And the fact that the hero keeps kicking his butt from the beginning.
Yeah.
A villain should be stronger than a hero. That's another huge one. They should be more capable than the hero.
There is I'm trying to think of the equivalent in English, but I'm drawing a blank. So I'm going to just very quickly talk about a very frightening Greek short story where the villain is an old man that is paraplegic, basically confined to bed, and the only thing that he can do is talk. Everybody else is fully able, and they could kill him or walk away at any moment. But he has all this leverage on them, on various levels that you get to discover, as the story progresses and through the dialogue. And he controls absolutely everybody, to the last servant in the house. And he is the most powerful one there. And you get to be very much afraid of what he will know, what he will learn of things that are going on. And whatever, whenever he that he is going to be acting, although it's just an old man in a bed, totally helpless.
Yeah.
And he is the biggest villain. And when in the end, spoiler, when in the end he dies, and eventually we realize who killed him and how, it feels like a great victory, because the person that did it had to overcome a lot of obstacles, emotional and financial, that this old man was putting. So technically and objectively the weakest character in the game. Actually, the strongest player. And a very, very frightening man.
That's really, really interesting. Yeah, you can subvert all sorts of things like that and rearrange the game. What were you going to say, Pitt? You were going to say something and we all cut you off.
Yeah, we all jumped on it.
It'll come back to me.
Yeah, that is interesting. People have tackled that in various ways. I think the mother in what was that show about? The
Sopranos?
Sopranos, yeah, that's it. Baines and I share the same
too.
Brain, so it makes sense.
We do, yeah. I was literally thinking of her also, yeah.
So she's a character as well that has the traits that Tance describes as being as a character that would be weaker and all that kind of stuff, but is the one who has the actual power and rules over the seemingly the most powerful character in the show, which was Tony Soprano. So yeah you can really do.
She was literally when she was still alive, she was the scariest villain in that show.
Exactly.
Yeah, because if you can control someone that is like if you can control Superman, then who is the one that actually has Superman's strength? The one who controls.
Yeah.
Lois.
Exactly. Save me.
But yeah, say it's Darth Vader in the Star Wars film, Star Wars, not A New Hope, not Episode 4, it's Star Wars. Okay, right. So it's Grand Moff Tarkin. He is the bad guy. He is the supreme villain in that film. He controls Darth Vader, which makes him the bad villain, because yeah, like we're saying, whoever controls the super bad guy is the super bad guy. He's bigger than anyone, even though Moff Tarkin is just this extremely skinny old fellow with a face like a skull. He is the baddest evil villain there is in that movie, which is interesting. So yeah, that's a weird thing to consider. God, it all comes back to start. I will try and remember bloody webcomics for my examples, but I review so many of them that I can't remember any of them. It's just a weird thing.
I can't read. Illiteracy is my villain.
We only know films. And Pitt only knows horror films.
I'm thinking
True.
if you want to talk webcomics, like if you take King's Club, which is basically a cast full of villains, all of them, nobody is innocent in that webcomic. Nobody is pure, quote unquote. But if you take one of who is developing, in my opinion, into the biggest villain, is the one that is the most invisible, yet not to us, but as the audience, but to the rest of the cast. They don't realize that he is working in the sidelines against everybody, like all of them, and he is the okay, I won't spoil it, go read it, but he is the most appallingly callous bastard in the cast, and he definitely checks all the boxes for the most intimidating villain. Although you wouldn't consider him this if you had like a lineup of all the characters. He actually would probably come off as the exact opposite of that, and I think that is another element. The more the villain can hide, whatever that means, either you don't get to see him very often, or you don't get to realize it's him or her, okay, immediately, or they don't need to do much in order to cause a big devastation that then the other characters have to run around a lot in order to cancel out. Then you get again an intimidating villain, sort of like the Emperor sort of guy.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting perspective on that. Okay, I've been looking through the features, trying to jog my mind about the comics that I've read. They can bring up examples of villains, and I still can't think of anything. Oh my god. Let's see. Well, I can easily talk about Without Moonlight, because that has some good villains. Or, of course, The Brave Resistance, and we've got Ludka, which is a classic villain. He's very, very well realized. You know, you've got so many tropes that you've used to build him.
He's super tropey.
Classic Nazi
I love it. Down to the Mengele-esque glasses and the
And the monologuing, he already has one under his belt.
He monologues in front of a giant window with a glass of scotch in front of a one of those things. Like, dude, stop it. He's like, I can't. You won't let me. I'm like, all right.
And he also controls a mountain man that is also a brute.
You have a different kind of villain there. So you have the gross, evil villain who has no barriers, is just totally nasty. But you have in Ludka, you have a villain who controls that and doesn't have to go to those lengths because he has this brute to do that dirty work for him. And like we were saying with the mother in The Sopranos and all that kind of thing, or Grand Moff Tarkin. He can be sophisticated and quiet and evil in that kind of way because he's got this other person, this tool to do that other kind of work for him, which multiplies his strength. He is the king in chess, and that's the queen.
Yeah, that's nicely put, actually.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a very ugly chess.
Yeah, so that works really well. I'm trying to look through the features, trying to come up with something, but unfortunately, I tend to feature comics with not enough pages to have developed the villains to sufficient length.
Look for my favorites. We'll find some, definitely.
Okay, Children of the Gods, which is a comic I featured just a couple of weeks ago. This is, I thought this is a great comic, and this got 78 pages, so this has had a chance to develop. And in this comic, the superheroes, I don't know whether this is too much of a spoiler, but it only takes a few pages to read it. Like, it's only on the first few pages, actually. You work out that superheroes are actually the villains. And that is done in a weird way. These people are sort of they're villains in a way that gods can be villains. Spoiler, Children of the Gods. And they see themselves as that. They're sort of like a pantheon. But in the way that, say, the Greek gods could be villains as well as heroic characters, because they really didn't care about humanity in a caring kind of way. That humanity was sort of the like play toys for them. You know, they were above that, and these characters are like that. They're sort of above the humans. At least that's how they see themselves. And you know, the normal kind of mores and rules of polite society, they don't see that as applying to them because they're greater than any human. So that makes them villainous. Not necessarily because, you know, they cackle as they tie poor old ladies to train tracks and twiddle their moustaches. It's just because they treat humans like ants.
Yeah.
Your life doesn't matter to me. And from their perspective, you know, if we're being relativist, yeah, that's true for them. Because they're superpowered, and normal rules of humanity logically wouldn't matter to someone who has got superpower.
You don't really need to go even that far. You can find this way of thought in history. And if you take, for example, the Nazis, all the atrocities that they committed were done exactly based on this logic that there is a cutoff point where below that human rules and humanity rules and human rights and blah, the whole thing don't apply because these are subhuman species that are a little better or not better at all than apes. So you have human morality applying to fellow Nazis, but you don't have this applying to anybody else, and that's why you can have this duality between their comrades, let's say, and the those that they are antagonists against, because they literally were brought up, and that is historical fact. They were brought up to consider this as a fact of life, as the way the world worked. So there you go. Yeah, they will consider themselves good, and the good guys.
And that does work with any occupying army to some extent. If you're a part of an occupying army for another country, the local population you're going to see as being their lives aren't worth as much as the lives of your men, and that's just how those people in those situations tend to consider. It's probably, if we were in that situation ourselves, we would have a hard time forcing ourselves not to think that way, because that's how those kind of people do tend to think in those situations. So yeah, that is a bit of a constant with humanity, it seems.
Yeah, and the thing is that it might catch you, even though you might think that I don't do this. If you live and breathe and talk and interact with people that do this, eventually you will slip up, quote unquote, and do this yourself, which is something that I do try to show in Without Moonlight, in the sense that Arthur, who doesn't think that he does this, has been doing it, and he's going through a process now whether he will admit this or not is on the fence. But the reason that he has this terrible reaction to what is basically a consequence of war is how dare you moment. Like, how dare you rise up and kill my friend?
Yeah.
That you had no right to even try. That's the idea behind this.
Oh, definitely. Or how dare you enlighten me to what I've been doing? You are absolutely wrong. I am not that kind of person. I'm not the bad guy.
Exactly.
It's the reaction a lot of men have when they're told that they're being sexist or whatever. How dare you? You're the one who's sexist. It's not me. I'm not being sexist. No. But yeah, and then you realize, hang on, no, I was the bad guy all along. Oh, yeah. So yeah, it's an interesting thing. We have sort of digressed a bit from bad guys, but yeah, that is the relative.
Bad guys, from making bad guys intimidate.
Yes, making bad guys intimidating. Yeah, that's the thing. But relativism, as we were talking about before, that does have a lot to do with this, doesn't it?
With what? With intimidation or bad guy?
Making bad guys intimidating, making bad guys at all.
Yeah.
And context.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are a lot of, like, if you take a children's series, I don't know if the bad guys are intimidating in general, but I think that there is a tendency to get the conflict to come from some other source now than actually evil characters. Like, you might have antagonists, but usually they just have a different side that they're looking at things. They don't have all these boxes checked that we were talking about. They probably do have some moral code themselves. Generally, I mean, very few are like Aku in Samurai Jack. I think that was like an exception to that. Who, although he was ridiculous looking, in my opinion, is one of the most intimidating villains in recent cartoon.
Yeah, he's absolute evil, that character. That is an absolute evil character. There's no good about him.
Wait, which you cut out for a second? Which character?
The bad guy in Samurai Jack.
Oh.
Or Aku. I don't know how you pronounce Aku.
Yeah.
Aku, yeah.
From Samurai Jack. Oh.
Was he played by Mako?
I think so. I'm not sure.
Yeah, pretty sure.
I think he was.
That's good old Mako. Who played the the bad
this
guy
villain
in Powerpuff Girls.
Was I haven't watched Powerpuff Girls, but Aku was very funny and very entertaining, but he retained his intimidating status, and I think that he managed this because he was so efficient in keeping Jack from killing him for so long. Due to his power or whatever. He didn't strike me as super intelligent, but he had all the capacity to be very pragmatically threatening to the main character, and that is what makes the villain, in my opinion.
Yeah, because he had absolute power. He had incredible power. He was eternal. He could pop up anywhere. And the thing I remember from him was that he was evil in a way. Basically, there could be a bunch of peace-loving people, and he will introduce evil into it and just destroy their way of life.
Mm-hmm.
Just because he was so evil. You know, that is the kind of evil we're talking about. Not just an antagonist, but someone who will ruin whole cultures. That's the kind of thing. So, yeah. That's really well done kind of evil. That's more evil than Skeletor or Hordak or Mum-Ra, any of the classic kind of bad guys. Who were just, they were just evil because they had skull faces and they were out for themselves.
I don't know about Mum-Ra. He comes close, I think, in the rescue. But yeah, Skeletor definitely. Especially after that special where he has to walk around with a kid and he becomes softened up by the kid and yeah. Okay.
Yeah, Skeletor's the kind of bad guy who you'd want to have as an antagonist. If you could pick a bad guy, you'd pick Skeletor, because he's fun. I'd like him to be my bad guy.
I want to be.
Who would you guys pick as your antagonist?
Between the two of them?
Well, any character at all from anywhere.
In life?
Yeah, just say if you're a good guy, who would be your bad guy?
I'd want someone incompetent and inefficient.
Yes.
Exactly, Skeletor.
I'd go against Tanz's list because I want to be able to beat this character. Yeah. It's a tough one.
What, the Grinch?
The Grinch and his poor dog. So can they you were talking about like how they defeat or do damage to the at least a somewhat significant character to increase their intimidation. So what we often see is a villain will kill one of their own subordinates.
Oh yeah.
Or a side
character.
character.
Do that.
It's a Vegeta and Nappa situation.
I don't know.
Vegeta makes a good bad guy, actually, in those early stories. They hated him. He was a real good evil character. Before he became a good
best
guy.
Waifu ever.
Yeah, but were you afraid of him? No.
Yeah, all 4 feet of him. And see that's a good. He was small like Chucky. You could still be a little bit afraid of him.
Well, he was tougher than Nappa, and Nappa was a huge guy, big guy, but it didn't matter because he deferred to Vegeta. Because obviously Vegeta
it was a good situation.
Yeah, exactly. So Vegeta could be the quiet, cultured, evil fellow. Nappa was the big brute with a huge chin and ultra masculine fellow.
And a huge dick.
He was a huge dick. So yeah, that's a good point of that kind of character dynamic. And yeah, so there was no barriers for Vegeta. He would be the kind of things that you know, in Dragon Ball Z is a good example of this, because the things that would matter to Goku and, you know, Krillin and all the good guys, like Earth, we want to protect Earth, we want to protect the people, blah blah, we want to protect this, protect that, and, you know, maintain this kind of order. None of that would matter to any of those bad guys in that thing, which made them more intimidating, even though the bad guys are very silly, usually, well, all the time in Dragon Ball Z. They were still intimidating because none of those things mattered to them, and it didn't matter to them if they killed every single person on an entire planet. And that's what made them evil. You know, someone like, what's his name? Boo. Okay, so Boo is like incredibly silly kind of character for a lot of his arc, because he's a fat kind of character with his pink skin and bizarre clothes. He's very cute in the way he talks, but he would turn people into like desserts and eat them from memory. And
like he had a too. Like he was silly and off-putting kind of intimidation to him. It was like he was super silly, but like when he would get angry, you couldn't help but be like, oh shit, because it's like watching a clown get angry. Like, like this is good. Like I might not be immediately threatened by any, you know, he might not be facing me down at the wrong end of a Kamehameha or something, but it's like there's something uncanny a little bit about villains like that.
Yeah,
uncanny villains are, those. I think I would want an uncanny villain.
Would you? No, I did the worst.
I would want it, but like for the sake of story-wise, I guess I should say, yeah. I love uncanny villains like that. Yeah, like Norman Bates. Norman Bates. Think of Norman Bates. Well, I mean, you don't find out until the end that he, you know, is who he is. But, and I'm trying to avoid spoilers. I know Psycho has been out for years and years now, but you know, sometimes movies are kind of forgotten at the back of the shelf, so I think it's important to kind of let people rediscover them. But I was just rewatching it again the other day, and that ending scene where he's sitting there in the police station and you hear his mother monologuing in the back of his head, you know, in his mind, and you see how he's sitting there and stuff. And like Norman Bates, it's just like he's a scrawny little dude. Like, you know, there's nothing big and immortal about him or spectacular. But that last scene where they're focusing in on him, there's still something dangerous about him and uncanny and scary.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point that you're making. And I was thinking along those lines that the villain needs to be intimidating to the audience more than anything else. So, like, you could have a villain that is frightening exactly because he or she pulls down the good guy's defenses. Like you could have, what's the name of this student in Kill Bill that had this chain? How?
Go.
Yes.
Go.
So she, for example, Go. Okay, she
awesome.
would be.
Yeah, she was great.
She was amazing. imagine that she would be coming up to someone as a schoolgirl without the whole weapon immediately, at least obvious. The audience would be intimidated, not the target, because she would look like your Asian schoolgirl sort of girl. I don't know. I think that she would make a great villain exactly because again, some have this cloak of invisibility until it is too late.
Yeah,
right.
And
just like
Yeah, sorry, huh? Who's talking?
What? No. Just like I was saying, oh my God, I forget names. The murder that you were talking about in
Bates.
Psycho.
Yeah.
Yes,
Norman
thank you.
Bates.
Norman Bates.
Matter. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good example of the secret villain. Okay, that's what makes them intimidating. That's what makes them evil. I'm trying to think of other traits. Well, there's nothing
like it could
wrong.
be anyone kind of idea. It's sort of makes it scary.
There's nothing wrong with the obvious villain, like the big power. No. I was thinking of trying to think of a contemporary example. So Jasper in Steven Universe, I think she's called Jasper. That's the big or Beryl or something. I don't know. She's a big tough woman. So she conforms to that all those kind of stereotypes, which none of the villains we've been talking about so far do. So she's a big tough lady, and for the arc that she's introduced in, at least, she is the ultimate villain for, I think, till the end of a certain season. It's been a while since I've watched that, but she isn't someone who's subtle. She's someone who rants and screams, and she's super strong, super powerful, but she still manages to be an intimidating villain because, like Tance said in the introduction, in that she is someone who doesn't have those same rules and things she conforms to. She'll just capture anyone. It doesn't matter. And what makes her really, really intimidating when she is in her arc is because even though there are characters that we're led to believe are very strong and very able, like what's her name? The one with the cool hair. Red one. So I can't remember her name, but she is the most iconic character in the Steven Universe show. and she's always super competent. Whatever happens, she is the one who is always looked to as like the last line of defense. She is super competent. She will sort out any kind of situation, and if she doesn't sort it out, it's because of a secret test, and she was letting the others take the lead, and that. She is always competent. And this character, this bad girl character, Jasper, I think is her name, she just zaps her with a gun and splits her up into two people and just neutralizes her straight away. So that really does indicate her level of villainy and her level of being an intimidating bad guy, because she absolutely neutralizes the most powerful good guy in just seconds, So that is the way that's done. So I was trying to be contemporary and bring up something at least sort of newish.
Newish.
Yeah.
And I can't remember any of the two characters' names.
We all have a bad round of that today, I think. Yeah. Some days aren't Quackast days, but
exactly.
But could be also, I haven't seen the movie, I have only seen the trailer, but assuming Thor versus Hela, right? Where he throws the hammer that I will not try to pronounce at her, and she just catches it and destroys it.
She destroys it, yeah.
Garnet was the character I was trying to think of. Garnet.
Okay.
That's it. Yeah, sorry, Tance. Yeah, so Hela is a good example of it. So you're set up to believe that Thor is the super powerful god character and his hammer is absolutely undefeatable. That is the source of all his power, and suddenly, poof, it's gone. So that sets up Hela as being incredibly bad, more so than does her, fancy costume or horns or whatever, all that kind of stuff that she has. It's that kind of thing. So yeah, that's a fantastic way of setting up an intimidating bad guy. Not just a bad guy, but an intimidating one. Yeah, so...
Yes. And she may kill a couple of some well-known, some somewhat significant supporting characters, too. I think she does.
Yeah.
And she is very composed. She kind of ticks off these... checkpoints here pretty well, actually. She's efficient. She wears black.
That's important.
She is calm during the fight.
Yeah, she is calm. She stays composed.
Has this smug smirk going on, and like, I'm in control. I got this.
Very much so. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So that you've set up, you signaled, using the term from the last Quackast, the aspects of an intimidating bad boy, bad girl, whatever, bad person, antagonist.
So the idea of the uncanny, and you're like going even farther with that to your Lovecraftian, your ancient evils, and that kind of thing. I don't know if you consider those villains. Would you?
The force of nature.
I think I would.
Yeah. They straddle it, don't they? Because they're not just force of nature, they have a face, sort of.
They do sometimes, yeah. I'm thinking of Dormammu in Doctor Strange, who for some reason these days when villain comes up, that's what I think of first, because I loved what they did with that, and I thought it was done so well. And Dormammu has a face, has a name. He's incomprehensibly powerful, and if he's allowed to come in, we're all just going to live in agony for all eternity. That's kind of what he does. So that's, he does stuff that, you don't want people to do. And,
don't do those things.
And other people being scared of him. I mean, in the movie, he's in the comics as well. He shows up here and there, and that gives him a lot of gravitas too. After his early appearances, they retcon him a bit to be more powerful and stuff. But in the movie, he's set up really well to be this mythic, terrifying, sort of eternal evil being / dimension. He encompasses a dimension unto himself, kind of thing. So it gave me chills in a good way. That was like an intimidating villain to me.
Yeah, I haven't seen that, unfortunately. I keep meaning to, but I always forget that
it's good.
The movie.
It's good. I bet you'd like it.
Yeah, I
liked it.
Yeah, you did, huh? Yeah.
Go see it. Yeah, absolutely. I really liked it, and it really made me consider Western, Hollywood movies again, because I tend to gorge myself with Asian ones later.
Yeah, I was just trying to think of another kind of bad guy that came to me, but it's totally zapped out of my head, unfortunately. Oh yeah, okay, the Joker. So I'm not going to talk about the comic Joker, but the Nicholson Joker from the 1988 or 1989 Batman movie. So that was, the last time we'd seen the Joker was with Cesar Romero, I think, in those 1960s, 1970s Batmans, and he had become a bit of a joke to anyway, he had become a bit of a joke because of the way that show was so camp, And even though he was, the ultimate bad guy in that, we didn't really take him very seriously because he was a bit funny and, camp and silly. But and Nicholson coming to that, in that world, in the world of 1988, 89, most of the audience, all of the audience seeing those films had grown up with that version of the Joker. And so, we were all coming to that, and we were expecting that kind of thing again. How is he going to make this Joker bad? How is he going to, make this not a joke? But and Nicholson's character initially, he's dressed in the bright purple suit. He has the ridiculous smile on his face, wearing all the makeup. And initially, you do think he's a bit of a joke, but very, very quickly, he completely undermines that and completely subverts that, and you know exactly how evil and horrible this character actually is, despite the perpetual grin. And people talk about the whole what is he the Australian guy who played it in the Nolan films, and him being a great Joker. But, he's got all the horrible makeup and this and, that this way of acting that makes it obvious that he's a bad guy. Nicholson didn't. Nicholson is completely a clown in the way he appears, and he has the Richter smile on his face. He is the classic kind of Joker, but he still comes off as being absolutely evil and horrible, and, he's scary. So that was done so well. And he does, I can't remember how he did that. I think he burned someone's face off with acid or something like this, and he just do these horrible transgressive things. He make them laugh until they die, and he was a real bad guy, and you were scared of him and scared even for his subordinates, except for the guy from Conan. I can't remember his name, Tracy something or other. He was the only guy you knew who would survive. But yes. That to me is another good example of being able to make an intimidating evil bad guy, even though he would not necessarily be naturally intimidating or evil. Purple suit, big smile, always laughing. He had like a carnation on his chest that would normally spray water, but it sprayed acid.
Oh yeah, it sprayed acid.
Yeah.
He was good.
Yeah. So that's my big example. So we're sort of getting towards the past the hour. So any examples you guys want to bring up, or maybe tap this one dry?
Well, I have to say, because she's one of my favorite villains, and it's not really, I'm not the only one for this. I really do like Cersei Lannister from Game of Thrones as a villain. I haven't read the books consciously. I'm waiting for the entire thing to finish, and then I'll go read the books. But the cinematic Cersei is an excellent villain for that particular reason. That she has very little in terms of limits, moral limits in anything and everything she does. She is intelligent. She is very methodical and calm and reserved when it comes to her doing her villainy. I mean, she does have her eruptions of anger and stuff, but she, even when she's angry, you don't get the feeling that she is she is losing control of the situation. She's just angry and possibly drunk. So she comes across as a very, very formidable opponent. And frankly, none of the heroes so far have convinced me that they can take her down easily, at least, or
nice.
At all.
That's what you want.
And I like it.
Yeah.
Yes. I think the only one that can take her down for sure is the Ice King that is coming, the zombie king that is now marching through the world. Otherwise, no. I don't think that anyone can actually easily at least take her down. And that makes a good villain. She doesn't need to be super powered or anything like that. Just the icon, the image of her watching as she blows up the main city, the citadel, is what makes a villain in my book, like the super intimidating villain, the one that is a genocidal maniac, but not as much in a psychotic break that they will lose control. They have just enough grip on reality that they will unleash anything and everything in order to get their way, and that's all.
Yeah, they have no limits in that way. Yeah, that's how I do Cece in my comic. In that, she is she doesn't have the same limits that Pinky will do. She doesn't have the same moral concerns. So she's willing to transgress and to do whatever it takes. Whereas Pinky, she has limits and she has more of a moral code, and things do matter and mean things to her. But Cece, that's all subservient to Cece's higher goals, which, that sort of codes her as the villain, the antagonist, and Pinky as not. So that's a good way of doing it. Sometimes it can be the opposite way around. Sometimes you want your character not to care about the means. You want the character to break through the barriers in order to achieve their goals, and the villain will stick to the rule of law and strict codes. It just depends on what kind of story you're doing, doesn't it? Really, It can be either way. Just the really interesting thing about it, there is no straight, simple way of portraying a villain. It's context dependent in so many different ways. It's not relative always. It's context that changes the things.
Very much. That's true.
Right, so should we end it there then, guys?
Sure.
All right, thank you guys for listening to the Quackast 389, I believe. Yes, it is.
Thank you.
389.
Thank you.
Baddies. Intimidating baddies, not just baddies. All right, bye-bye.
So close to 400. Bye-bye.
Go straight to your hips. I was watching